our special guest today. It's Barry Adams. Maybe some of you already recognized him. Please say hi to him. Give him your wave in the chat while I'll introduce him. He is an award-winning SEO consultant specializing in technical and editorial SEO for news publishers around the globe. And surprise, surprise, we will talk about news SEO a lot today. He's been building and ranking websites since 1998 and has worked with a wide range of clients, from really small businesses to the largest news publishers on the planet. And as said, our well-known anchorman, head of SEO at Yoast, Jono Alderson, is also joining this month's webinar. Jono knows everything about SEO, analytics, WordPress, amongst a lot of other things. And we're super lucky to have him here today because he's traveling the world again to inspire people with his keynotes on any stage possible. So I'll leave it with that. And I wish you a really nice webinar, guys. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Nika. That was lovely. Yeah, that's a lot to live up to, right? So let's do a screen share thing. Anchorman, that's a lot of responsibility. Let's see if I can do this without breaking things. Okay, so today's plan, there will be a recording available. We'll publish that afterwards. You should get an email. Everything is fine. Don't worry. Today we're going to cover a whole bunch of stuff. We've got about an hour and we have a lot of ground and we want to spend as much time as possible tapping into Barry's wisdom and mining some insights from him. So we're going to go super fast through a bunch of Google News, Microsoft News, etc., etc., etc. You can read the slides, right? Don't need to read all of that. So if at any point today you feel like you've lost the plot or you don't understand what we're talking about, or you think, hey, that's really interesting, I want to learn more, go check out the links. We do have a whole bunch of information about the topics that we're covering and links to a whole bunch of resources like Yoast SEO Academy, where you can go learn more about all of this stuff and take courses and get certified and so on and so forth. All very cool. So that's the plug. Let's do some stuff. And very conveniently, on a Google News webinar, joined by unarguably the world's leading expert in news SEO, the first big piece of news we have is Google News is changing, right?
That's massive. Well, not really, but yeah, it's massive. Yeah, new design. I quite like it. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to experiment with it yet. It puts more emphasis on local news, on customized news feeds, on what Google says, showing you what you really want to see. The old design, I got used to it in the end, but it was a bit clunky, not particularly modern, so you definitely needed an update. And it could be a bit of a hassle to find the sort of news you actively want to read from the publications you want to read and from the area that you live in. So with the redesign, Google has really successfully managed to put that front and center. And I quite like it. Having said that, most people who engage with news on Google's ecosystem never go to the news.google.com vertical. But we'll talk more about that later on. So it's nice, but it's a fairly small percentage of users that actually go to this as a news landing page, as it were.
Yeah, spoilers on the stuff we're going to talk about later. This is not where Google News lives, really, is it? That's going to be.
I also quite noticed it looks a lot in terms of design decisions to Google Search Console. There's obviously the new design language in Google. There's some big name designers are pushing to roll out across all Google's ecosystem.
Yeah, that's true. That's going to make it harder to work out where you are when you've got 20 tabs open.
Yep.
Also of interest, web stories we've talked about on and off over the last few months. This is Google's answer to Instagram. I think unofficially, it's what if we could have our own stories format where people are doing mobile first, visual, rich, swipey, interactive things. I really like the idea of this. I'm still not sure whether it's going to become anything, but Google are pushing it quite hard, especially in the US, except it turns out there is a huge problem, unexpectedly, with web spam. You knew, right, in the Google ecosystem, where so when big news outlets like, I don't know, The Guardian, The Times, the New York, whatever, publish a story, a whole bunch of people are going and grabbing the headline, grabbing the images, creating their own web stories, getting straight to the top of Google Discover at the expense of the brands. And this feels like a huge copyright and content issue that Google just have no interest in solving, right? They're just like, no, this is a legal problem. It's yours. You deal with it. So, oops, skipping slides. That feels like a bit of a mess. And I guess I'm harking forwards, but this is similar to a lot of the challenges in the news ecosystem, right? Where it's a bit Wild West.
Yeah, I mean, Google is notoriously bad at deduplicating content when it comes to ranking. I think they always err on the side of diversity rather than, throwing out content that's duplicated across multiple domains. Especially in the context of news, and web stories is sort of a form of news content, and that it tends to be fairly recent stuff and very much topically focused on the latest happenings. Because I suspect that deduplicating content on web pages is quite resource intensive, because Google has to strip all the boilerplate content, all the design from it, isolate what the actual body content of any web page is, including a web story, which is sort of a web page really, and then do some deduplication on that to see whether or not it is plagiarized. That's hard and resource intensive, takes time. And in the news ecosystem, one thing you don't have is time. You have to take short. So this does not surprise me in the least. I hope it's not the death knell for web stories, though, because web stories as a format, I'll be honest, when they were first launched, I was a bit of a skeptic, but I quite liked them. You can swipe through them. It's a nice, engaging way to tell a story in the web format without having to use a third-party app. It can just happen in your browser. So I quite like it as a format. But yet, there needs to be some way for Google to give more prominence to reputable outlets and not let any cowboy outfit just publish duplicate stories, really.
Yeah, that's a bit scary. I guess the nice side of this is that web stories work as a format. And don't go and steal news content. But if you do want a kind of shortcut to do well in Google Discover and get your content in front of people, this can be a good tool. There's an official WordPress plugin for it, built and maintained by the team at Google. If you haven't played with it, go and take a look. It's a very different type of publishing. It's a different type of content. It's much closer to Instagram than it is WordPress, but it's worth having a play. Pretty cool. Other fun stuff that was kind of loosely connected to the news space was Google updated a bunch of their guidelines around best practice for describing the author of an article using structured data, which is super nerdy and in the weeds. But what we really liked about this is we already do this. We've already done this in Yoast. Your site already does this and has done for months and months and months, which is pretty cool. It's always nice when we're ahead of Google on best practice and then they go, yep, what those guys said. So that's pretty cool. Worth noting that if you're using authors on your site and you're publishing posts and pages, go and check your user profiles on those. Make sure you've filled in everything: first name, last name, middle name, place of birth, etc. And if you're using Yoast SEO Premium, we add a whole bunch of extra fields like date of birth, awards you've won, suffixes, prefixes of your name, languages spoken. It's worth going in and adding those. Google's documentation now finally says, go and enrich all of your author information and tell us about them. That's really cool. It's worth going and spending a little bit of time for your key people to describe them in a way that Google can understand, and then we take care of all the tech side and the output. So yeah, this is really nice. Good stuff.
Yeah, I like it. I like it too. I think it's nice that Google makes it a bit more explicit about what it wants to see in structured data markup for authors, and it's of course all part of Google's efforts to identify individuals and authenticate that they're real people, so that they can trust the content that your website is publishing.
Yeah, and things like this person went to this university and has these awards is a really good way to reconcile and differentiate and work out who's who. Yeah, nice. This was good. Google sorted out a whole bunch of the ambiguity in Google Search Console, which I'm sure many people have seen and got confused and scared by. Do you want to run us through what's changed?
Yeah, basically they took away the warnings report, which is fair enough, put it in a different location, so that web pages are either valid or not valid. Because it's one of the questions, I don't know about you, but when I work with websites and with clients, the warnings is always like, oh, okay, do we really need to fix this? Or is it just more of a nice to have? Because it's quite alarmist when you see that report in Search Console, the big orange bars. So Google said, you know what, we're just going to simplify that. It's either invalid, and in that case, it's probably not eligible for ranking, or it's valid and it can rank, but there might be still some things you can do to improve it, which is, how they format the new report. So I quite like it. It makes it a little bit trickier to find out the actual improvements, but at the same time, it removes any ambiguity about what is working, what is not working in terms of content on your website and how it's performing in Google's index. So yeah, I think it's a nice simplification of the index coverage report, and yeah, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I hope they do the same sort of stuff. Otherwise, we have similar problems with schema and structured data where they show a bunch of warnings, and the warnings are actually recommendations, and they're not necessarily. Yeah, it's really badly labeled and it's confusing.
Yeah. Oh, I have to say, sometimes a warning eventually is sort of an early notice that something may become an actual error later down the line.
Yeah.
For example, I can totally imagine that at some stage Google is going to make some recommended fields in some structured data attributes required fields, in which case you'll probably want a bit of a heads up that you need to build that before they become invalid.
Yeah, and I guess SEO is always a game of like 1,000 small advantages, right? So if there are things you can go do in there, don't ignore them because Google says it's green. Go in and find the things you can improve still.
Exactly.
Yeah, check it out. Okay, everybody's second favorite search engine providing company, Microsoft, and Bing are doing some stuff, which is always exciting. Though in this case, it looks like what they're doing is essentially rolling out their own version of Google Shopping, which isn't game-changing, but it's slightly different in some interesting ways. So like Google Shopping, the premise is I can search for and review and compare products and services, and I can click on them in the search results and buy it there directly, same as Google Shopping. But the difference with Bing's approach is that it's based more on user preferences. So you can say, I like cats, but not dogs. And then more of your search results will be orientated towards that. Or I don't want stuff that's from this topic or this country or whatever. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of kind of tailoring there. Whereas Google's ecosystem is obviously very amorphous, algorithm driven, and you don't get a lot of control over that. So a slightly different approach, which I like from Bing. I like that they're trying to do stuff a bit differently rather than follow. I guess the downside, this is a small trial and it's US only at the moment, but maybe this will go out. As many of their stuff is, right? They launch with like 100 people in America and maybe it gets further. So
yeah, I mean, it's Bing and it has a very small percentage of users, but at least they're not sitting still. You know, they're trying to.
Yeah.
The fun part, as I see it, is whenever Bing does something really interesting and really innovative, the people who build that in Bing tend to get poached by Google. You can have a lot of fun reading really interesting information retrieval papers, research papers being published by people working at Microsoft, and then see their job titles change in the next 6 months to a year when they suddenly work for Google.
Ouch, that's pretty painful for Bing, I guess.
Yeah,
we should visualize that.
They need to maybe be a bit better at keeping their staff and build a better search engine rather than let all the best people be seduced by the money that Google has.
That is true. Though, interestingly, and way off topic, Google lost a whole bunch of people recently to Shopify. And there's a whole kind of people, all the top tier people moving around. So, yeah, we'll see where the cool new features end up.
Mm.
Okay, what else have we got? Some WordPress news. Everybody's favorite content management system, right? So a whole bunch of Yoasters went to WordCamp EU in Porto, not last week, I think the week before, which was pretty awesome. Huge kind of global scale gathering of all the WordPress people to come together to contribute to the code, to onboard people, to talk, to listen to talks, to network, etc., etc. That was really cool. Oh, I see some comments about AMP in the chat that Barry is no doubt responding to now. Yeah, here we go. We'll talk about AMP later briefly, maybe if we have time. But in the meantime, yeah, so we all went to WordCamp in Porto, and there were some interesting things came out of that. One was the roadmap for WordPress 6.1, which is coming up soon. It's the next big release, which has a browse mode and more focus on patterns, which are kind of both related to this gradual move we see towards full site editing, where rather than having your content and your front end and your blocks and your templates and your pages, all of these become kind of one thing, and you just seamlessly edit your site in whatever context you're in. I'm a little bit skeptical. They still feel a little bit half-baked. They're kind of working out what these things as they go, as we all are. As like one of the great things about WordPress is it's iterative and we work it out as we go together, but sometimes it would be nice if we had a little bit of a plan. I am happy about these longer term things, though. I think that collaborative editing and multilingual support are hugely needed for WordPress. They are fundamental requirements for the modern web. I think being able to edit a document with other people, like you might do in, say, Google Docs, should be the standard way of working. It's far more effective than handing things off. And multilingual just feels like something we should have baked in. It's something a lot of competing content management systems do by default. A lot of the world does not speak English as a first language. This feels like it should be basic. I would love to see more resource pushed on these so we can get them faster. If you have the resource or capacity or motivation to contribute to WordPress, it'd be good to get in and get more voices in that to say, even at the very least, we think this is important. I think this is a huge deal, and I want to see it faster than 2024. So yeah, let's get some non-English WordPress support. Yeah, that's cool. Other stuff, some interesting stuff in social media. There was a leaked internal memo. I don't know whether it was leaked or just released, but an internal memo from Facebook from the head of Facebook's app. Head of Facebook app at Meta, saying that they are desperately trying to make their algorithm and their experience feel more like TikTok, which is interesting because for two reasons. One is the sheer volume of adoption of TikTok is astounding. I got some stats earlier, something like 2.2 billion downloads between 2019 and 21, and 176 million downloads just in the last few months. Short form video is here to stay. TikTok might come or go, but short form video as a way of consuming content quickly on the fly, bite-sized information, socially shared, influenced is huge. So they're saying, Facebook is saying they're going to open up their news feed to more popular content from more sources and do some structural changes. But the point is they're saying they're trying to make Facebook more like a discovery engine, which the SEO in me goes, okay. Facebook isn't cool anymore, but people are going to be searching. They are going to be browsing. They are going to see things that inform their decisions, that influence what happens next. And yeah, it's going to be hard to sell things through a Facebook thing that's a bit like TikTok, but you can influence what happens next. And this is a huge deal. And I think as marketers and SEOs, we need to be thinking beyond just our website and the content consumed there and thinking people are searching. What do they see? What happens next, and can we influence that? So I think this is a much bigger deal than just Facebook trying to catch up. This is a kind of step change in how these platforms work.
I think it's a huge competition for people's attention spans. Facebook has more users. TikTok has much higher engagement numbers than Facebook, which is why Facebook is a bit worried, because engagement numbers sell ads. And that's Facebook's big income stream, obviously, and it's going to be TikTok's big income stream. So I'm not on either of those platforms, by the way. I gave up on all social media except Twitter. So I am not particularly worried about where any of this is headed. But yeah, it is just that constant fight for people's attention spans.
Yeah, for sure. And their ad spend, right? Thinking of Twitter, you just mentioned, do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, the no follow attribute disappeared from Twitter links on their web app, which makes some people think, oh, we can spam all these links on Twitter, and Google is going to index them, and Google is going to assign page rank value to that, and all the page rank we get from Twitter is going to help us rank better. No, I have no idea why specifically Twitter decided to drop the no follow attribute, but I can guarantee you that a link on Twitter will not benefit your SEO in the slightest. Google has access to the Twitter firehose anyway, and they had that before this change. They continue to have it, which allows them to show tweets directly in search results. Links in tweets are just such a noisy signal as far as Google is concerned. They probably don't have an awful lot of value associated with them. So yeah, you don't really need to do anything. And if anybody is trying to sell you Twitter link building services, please just delete their email and get on with your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Twitter links maybe can still be good for discovery, potentially. Like we found this link, let's go check out what's there. But yeah, they're certainly not going to rank your site based.
I think they always have done that with the Twitter firehose, specifically link velocity. Yeah. If something goes viral, Google is fairly on top of that quite quickly. I don't think they ever really saw the nofollow attribute as a hindrance there. And last year, Google already started to interpret nofollow links as hints rather than directives, and could override that nofollow attribute at their leisure. So yeah, nothing particularly interesting there, if you ask me.
Nope, no big explosion. Nice. Okay, some random miscellaneous tech news from some other parts of the web which are possibly going to infringe on our little SEO world. The big players have got together and agreed a new set of EU legislative rules that encourage them to take more responsibility over their content, over fake news, over reducing abuse, over all sorts of good things. In theory, there's nothing really forcing these players to these brands to do this, but now that there's formal rules. They'll hopefully play along. There's incentive for them to look like they're trying at least. So they essentially have to make a greater effort to halt the spread of fake news and propaganda. And there's like 40-something specific guidelines that they've committed to following. And they're all centered around things like more transparency for political advertising, easier ways to report spam or abuse, penalizing sites that spread fake news. So hopefully this will mean that the platforms and the amount of spam cleans up a little bit. These get a bit more reliable, and that more broadly, this becomes a standard for the web and for websites. And we have some kind of legal framework for saying, actually, fake news isn't just an inconvenience. It's harmful. It's damaging. So we see the web growing up a bit, which is nice. We complain a lot. It's a bit of a Wild West and that legislating this stuff is hard. This feels like they've got it right.
Yeah, I think it does, but it does also feel like it should have happened like 7 or 8 years ago. There have been some fairly important political decisions made by electorates in the last half decade or more that have been enabled by disinformation and actually people just lying on the web in very large scale. So better late than ever, I suppose. It does feel like it's a good foundation to work off of. I am still worried about enforcing this, and spammers tend to move faster than regulation. So ways around this, unfortunately.
Yeah, don't they just? That's tricky. But then related, the other side of the coin is whilst the platforms in one respect are agreeing that they're going to behave well, there's a broader challenge, and I know this is something we talk about a lot, of monopoly powers and monopolistic behavior. That Google dominates search to the tune of about 90% of the search market, depending on whose numbers you read. And Amazon dominates e-commerce, and various other people dominate their spaces. And in almost all of those cases, you could very easily make an argument that they use that power unfairly. And in this example, almost all video results in Google are from YouTube. That is a company owned by Alphabet, which is the same company that owns Google. And Google's argument for that will be these are the best results, which may well be true. Those YouTube videos may be the best platform, the best quality videos served in the fastest, the best way, but they crowd out room for innovation, and they make it really hard for other companies to come and do something better, because how on earth do you ever get there? And there's all sorts of versions of this story, and there's huge amounts of legal stuff going on at the moment that might force them to be more competitive, to break up some of this. I think this is fascinating. Like, it might fundamentally change the shape of the internet overnight if this goes through the way it will, and we'll see bits of these platforms be broken up, bits of anti-competition will come in. This is amazing.
Yeah, I think the interesting result of these bills is that we will have to put very clear delineators on what is a standard search result and what is a different property. For Google, when they introduced universal search, was it back in 2007? It was a natural enrichment of search results with images, with videos, with news. And what bills like these might force Google to do is strip that right back to just organic search results, and everything else is open to competition. So rather than just news results from Google's own Google News system, we might see news from MSN, Microsoft system in there as well. We might see another news aggregator pop in there and show stories and allow people to choose which ones they want. Similar with image search. Why not? Right now it's all powered by Google image search, but it's a distinct vertical. Will that mean there'll be a rival image search engine? Is Pinterest going to build an image search engine, which can then be an option for you to use within Google's ecosystem? It's definitely interesting, and I'm really keen to see what the implementation of that is. I do definitely think there needs to be a handbrake pulled on the dominance of the big tech companies, because at the moment you can't really see any new startup displace the big companies, no matter how good they are, because they just won't ever get a chance to build that audience. It's just locked in to these existing ecosystems.
Yeah, and it's not even like you're going to try and take on Google. You can't now compete in flights. You now can't compete in hotels. You now can't compete in images. Like, they just crowd everything out. And yeah, they provide a great service, and users go, we love this. But what could have been if they hadn't been dominating?
I think earlier this week, or was it late last week, a Danish job portal filed an antitrust complaint with the European Commission that Google Jobs is basically stealing their traffic. And you can't really find much flaw with their argument, because Google Jobs is stealing those job portals by having that Google Jobs box right at the top of search results. So, they have a good case there. The Jobs box definitely is useful for users, but is it Google just abusing their monopoly to build a different vertical?
Yeah, tricky. Well, one of the things that you can do if you find that a bit objectionable is go use a different search engine. And there are a few others outside of Google and Yahoo. DuckDuckGo is quite popular from a privacy perspective. There's U.com is quite interesting. Ahrefs launched, what's their one called? Yep. You, DuckDuck, yep. There's a handful. But so DuckDuckGo is declining, which is concerning, like as the underdog. Conventionally, and very privacy focused, very good features, pretty good search results. It's concerning to be seeing their numbers declining. I guess in an ideal world of more balanced players, you'd see them doing quite well. But yeah, so you can vote with your feet if you want to, and go and use a different search engine. Worth knowing. Okay, a little bit of Yoast news before we let Barry tell us all about the world of news, SEO news, SEO news for news. I've lost track. We've launched a whole bunch of stuff. Yoast SEO 19.1, there's a whole bunch of new stuff in our content analysis. In the last premium update, you might have seen we launched a whole bunch of features for crawl settings to reduce the amount of pointless stuff that search engines are crawling on your site, like the RSS comments feed of your blog post, which WordPress creates and outputs on all of your pages, which no human has ever digested, which probably no search engine has ever done anything with, but Google hits it hourly, time and time again, every minute, every however long. So we kill a whole bunch of that makes your site more efficient. Really nice kind of carbon footprint story here that we're saving rainforests worth of electricity collectively by turning off all of this. Go in and check it out. And then some WooCommerce stuff for handling product variations, which I know has been a nightmare for everybody for 100 years. That's pretty cool. Go check that out. And there's even more. I think today we launched an integration with WordProof, which does blockchain proof of records of your privacy pages, which is pretty cool for a whole bunch of reasons, including like legal validation, a whole bunch of improvements to our readability stuff, some social sharing stuff, a whole bunch of schema improvements. You get the idea. Oh, and controversially, we launched an Index Now integration, which we previously said we would never, ever do, but times have changed and the landscape's improved. If you haven't checked this out, it's really cool. Every time you hit save or publish on a page in your site, we will ping Index Now, and Index Now in turn gets consumed by Bing, Yandex, Yahoo, a bunch of other search engines, sadly not Google, but it does mean they come and crawl your page immediately, which can be really good for spaces like news, where you want to get into the news as quickly as possible. You don't want to wait a day for Google to come see your content. And breathe. That's a lot of stuff. Isn't that cool? So we've talked about news a lot. Let's change gear and dive into it a bit, I guess. So Barry, let me hand over my screen sharing to you. Yeah. If I can work out, can you do that? Do you have a thing?
I think I can.
Very high tech.
There we go.
Oh, nice. We're bang on time as well. I've got loads of time. Let's talk about some news. Because I know very little about this space. I shouldn't say that out loud, but it feels like it's chaotic and changing and much stricter than conventional SEO. So,
it's good fun. It's good fun. It's my favorite part of the web. When we talk about Google News, we tend to talk about this. We mentioned this at the start of the webinar. We talked about the new design. This is still the old design, by the way. On a very rare day when there was actually quite nice weather in Belfast, as you can see there. And this is the Google News subdomain, news.google.com. And when you say Google News, this is what most people tend to think of. Of course, the reality is a bit different. It usually is. When we look at Parsley traffic, Parsley, by the way, is a content analytics tool that is used by a lot of publishers to see where traffic on their website is coming from in real time. And as you can see there, the Google News vertical, the purple line at the bottom, is not a particularly big line, but that's traffic from news.google.com, which you can actually separate out in your Google Analytics and other analytics programs by referral. And it doesn't really count for much. But publishers do get a lot, and I do mean a lot of traffic from Google. Now, where does that traffic come from? Well, you probably know there's also something called a news tab on Google search results. There you go. If you click on the news tab on any specific query, you get results from news articles around that particular topic that you're searching for. That just tends to come into your website as organic search traffic. But in Google Search Console, there is a filter that you can apply, the news filter, which allows you to specify exactly, to separate that traffic out from all your organic search traffic to see where they're actually coming from and if people are coming from the news tab. And when you do that, you get graphs like this, which means actually, no, that's not a lot of traffic either. Oh, that's quite poor. That's really, really bad. Yeah, as it turns out, people don't really use the news tab either. Like 4 or 5% of your total organic traffic from Google might come from the news tab. It's not exactly what we'd be screaming about. So what else is there? What happens in Google's ecosystem that news gets so much traffic? Well, it's usually this. Top stories boxes. That's the big boy on the block. The last statistics I read on this is that between 10% and 12% of all Google searches have a news box of some form or another. The top stories box, the publisher box, a headlines carousel, whatever it is. And that is where most news publishers will get the bulk of their organic traffic from Google from. Most of the publishers I tend to work with have roughly half or more of that total traffic coming just from Google. And that is nearly all traffic from top stories boxes. That's what that big blue line at the top of that Parsley report is from. It's Google top stories articles showing up in Google's ecosystem. And there's one other part of that equation, which is Google's Discover feed. In Search Console, it's shown as organic search results. It's all heaped together, by the way, and Discover gets a separate block there. And Discover is not really search. That's one of the interesting things. So Discover is, of course, just people on Android phones using the feed to look at recent articles. You can also do it on iPhone with the Google app. And it's basically searchless news. It's content served up by Google based on what they know about you, what your interests are, and the kind of websites and news articles that you like to read. And it's very closely related to Google's news ecosystem in that Google uses a lot of the same mechanisms to crawl and index that content, and a lot of the same ranking factors to evaluate whether or not a publisher should show up in Google Discover. Because, of course, in Google's news ecosystem, as part of Google organic search, there is a lot of emphasis placed on quality signals, transparency, trustworthiness. We mentioned that briefly before as well when we talked about authorship. That Google is very much focused on serving quality content to users in all of their ecosystems, including Discover, as well as in news, as well as in regular search results, etc., etc. So they borrow a lot of the same ranking factors, a lot of the same algorithms to determine quality and relevancy. So when we talk about news, we tend to talk about primarily top stories boxes, somewhat on the news tab, and of course the news at google.com subdomain, and also on Discover. And the focus on optimizing for Google News in this entire ecosystem is on building good quality signals, highly relevant content, obviously, which is similar to what you do with classic SEO. And one of the things that's a bit different is the focus on speed, in that the news ecosystem is very fast moving. In fact, the average life cycle of an article in a top stories box is about 2 days maximum. And after that, it drops off and doesn't show up in top stories anymore. Sometimes articles show up a bit longer than that. But generally speaking, after 2 days, an article will not be seen in top stories boxes anymore on Google results, which means, you're not going to get a lot of Google organic traffic to it anymore. So a lot of the focus that you have when you do SEO for news publishers is to make Google's life as easy as possible when it comes to crawling and indexing newly published articles. So you're focusing very much on crawl optimization to make sure that Google can crawl your website as fast as possible, and there's not a lot of waste on URLs and pages that Google shouldn't be crawling. And you also focus a lot on optimizing for indexing, which is where the structured data comes in. News article structured data with all the right attributes in there makes it very easy for Google to index an article and know exactly what the article is about and how that article can be shown in Google's news ecosystem. So yeah, that's what I spend most of my time doing, and I hope we have some questions about that. And if you're interested in SEO for news publishers, in October we have the second ever news and editorial SEO Summit. We had the first one in October last year as a bit of an experimental event organized by myself and John Shahata from Condé Nast. And it turned out to be a massive success. Yoast was also a sponsor, by the way. Thank you very much for that. And in fact, we have Joost de Valk himself as our keynote speaker for this year's event. And we also have speakers from The Athletic, from The Motley Fool, from Google, from The Guardian, from Shopify, and a whole host of other companies to deliver interesting talks about all aspects of performing well in Google News, in top stories carousels, in Google Discover, and also how you build your value as a news publisher with things like good technical SEO, commercial content in the affiliate space, etc., etc. And Claudio, for example, is going to be talking about live articles, which I'm really looking forward to as well, because that's a very interesting aspect of top stories as well, those live badges that you see for live update articles. So yeah, if you're interested in optimizing websites for news, for Google's news ecosystem, go to newsseo.io and get yourself a ticket for our Summit later this year. That's it.
Thank you very much. That's fascinating. Yeah, it's much faster and much stricter, right? There's kind of more moving parts, and you've got to be really tight on quality and so forth. Yeah, so we had a few things I wanted to kind of walk through and explore a little bit before we get to the Q&A. And I guess the big thing that's rattling around my head is if most of what we conventionally think of as Google News isn't in fact Google News, and a lot of it is increasingly in Discover and kind of handed up to us, can everybody be a news publisher? Like, should everybody be, or is it still a space that's very limited to the big newspapers, etc.? Like, is there a play here for small businesses?
Theoretically, yes. In practice, it's a bit more challenging. In my experience, it's a bit easier to get into Discover. Google has sort of a broader remit for the Discover feed and allows pretty much any website with interesting content to surface there. For the more strict news elements, like top stories and the news vertical, it's very hard to show up as a source there unless you are a dedicated news publisher. If you, for example, you have a commercial website for whatever, a SaaS, whatever you're selling, and you have a really good news section or even just a news subdomain with your commercial branding on it, it's not likely Google is going to show that in Google News and top stories. Google wants you to have a dedicated news website focused purely on publishing news, and any commercial relations with other types of business need to be very much in the background there, and your website should not serve as a lead generator or business generator for the commercial side of the business. It needs to be a news-focused website. The inclusion process for getting into that news ecosystem, it used to be a manual process where you fill a form and Google or somewhere in some data center somewhere would do a manual review and either approve you or disapprove you. Now, they retired that in December 2019, and they moved to an algorithmic process, which has proven quite tricky for a lot of websites who have not yet made it into Google News. In my experience, it'll take you at least 2 years of publishing high-quality, newsworthy content on a fairly decent scale, ticking all the technical boxes and all the quality and relevancy boxes before Google will accept you on a more permanent basis as a source in its news ecosystem.
Wow.
So you have to have the long-term view here. You need to have a lot of patience and a lot of persistence to get into Google News as a new website. Whereas previous websites who were already manually approved, they basically get a free ride in the new algorithmic system and will continue to show their content in Google's news ecosystem. So it's not like, oh, we're going to launch a news section and we're going to get all this traffic from Google News after a couple of months of effort. Nah, it's a lot more complicated and a lot harder than that. So in short, not any website is going to be allowed into Google News. You need to have a dedicated news website, and you need to have a sufficient level of history for Google to accept you as a proper news publisher.
That sounds like a lot of work. I guess then for most businesses, it's going to be a better approach to try and do something newsworthy and be featured somewhere else rather than trying to become a news publisher.
Exactly.
That's tricky. And I guess, yeah, the Discover angle is interesting then, isn't it? So the alternative is you just try and be topical enough and move fast enough that you don't even aim for conventional Google News. You just try and get surfaced in Discover, but that's obviously much harder to predict, much harder to manage, and still has a whole bunch of challenges. Tricky. One of the things I wanted to touch on briefly is, I know we've debated this a lot, is the relationship between publishers and Google and how we ought to manage that and how healthy that is and where it's all going. And are we friends? Are we enemies? How does this all fit together? Especially with like the new regulation stuff in Europe, right?
Yeah, it's definitely frenemies. You know what? I believe that Google, in their heart of hearts, don't like the situation they're in at the moment. They've sort of made people rely on Google to find news, especially in top stories boxes on regular search results. But I think they originally launched the news vertical to be a separate thing. And I think there are a lot of people at Google who wish they could just do that and say, right, go to news.google.com for all your news, and we'll keep news out of regular search results. But they can't because people have started to rely on that. And it's the main discovery mechanism for news content. In fact, it's what you expect. You type something of a current affair in Google search results, you expect Google to surface the latest news on that topic. You don't want to go to a separate website for that. But of course, Google, of course, then has that challenge that, okay, who are we going to show? Which are the most relevant sources? Which sources can we trust and can we not trust? And the publishers themselves are like, okay, are Google stealing our traffic? Are they just showing headlines so that people don't need to read on to the actual article? Are they showing little snippets of our content? It's an interesting and challenging one. I can see where the publishers themselves are coming from, because they, of course, came from a sort of golden age of news publishing where they were basically printing money. And they see all of that eroded. The obvious one, of course, is that, hey, Google needs to pay us for the news, but that I don't necessarily take anybody seriously who says that, because the business models of news publishers pre-Google, the news was never their income stream. They made most of the money with classified ads, not with news. Classifieds were taken over by all kinds of different websites. You buy your car and you go to a different website to research which cars you want to buy. And that used to be the purview of news websites with the classified section. The same with job portals. Used to be something you got from the newspaper, and now it's something you do online. And that is really where news publishers have lost their income streams. And news itself was always more of a way to build an audience, which you can then sell on to advertisers, which is very similar to what Google has done with search. Search is a mechanism for them to build an audience, which they can sell to advertisers. I never bought into the fact that, hey, Google is stealing our audience. I do think that Google, and this is a part of a broader discussion, in which case I'm very much firmly on the side of the publishers. Google has become a gatekeeper of the web. When you show up in Google, you get traffic. When you don't show up in Google, you don't get traffic. So if you're invisible in Google, you might as well not exist as a website. And that is something that broader regulation needs to address. We have a company here, a single company with a single product, which serves as the gateway to a crucial part of pretty much any business's revenue stream, which is search, which is being findable on the web. But again, there's no easy answers there. How are you going to regulate that? It's a love-hate relationship definitely between publishers and Google. And Google has launched all kinds of initiatives to help publishers become more successful. The Google News initiative especially has been quite successful in especially helping small regional publishers or very niche publishers. As the Google News Showcase, which pays publishers in sort of a one-size-fits-all paywall that people use on their app to get access to all the paid content of the New York Times, The Atlantic, and all the other paywall websites. So there are, things moving in the right directions there. Let's be honest, news publishers themselves probably need to work a little bit harder to earn loyal audiences, which is something that some publishers have done really, really well. Most of us tend to be focused on primarily one news website and tend to skip Google entirely. I don't know about you, but that's what I do. I go to a news website directly. I don't Google News very rarely when I want to read the news myself. I just go to the homepage of my favorite news publisher. And that, of course, circumvents the entire issue. And that's, I think, something that a lot of generic news websites maybe struggle with, and how to build that loyalty, how to build that audience. So, I see the issue from both sides summarized, but in a nutshell, you have to earn it. You have to work hard at it, and you have to make sure that you publish something as a news website that people can't necessarily get anywhere else, so that you build that loyalty. And then, whether or not people use Google, it becomes entirely irrelevant.
Which is the same with all SEO, right? What a great conclusion. Like, build a brand, be differentiated, add unique value, solve your users' problems, and get them to come to you because they trust you and they know you and they recognize you. And then, who cares about that multi-billion conglomerate search engine over there? Doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Nice. Lovely. Thank you. That was super useful. Can you skip forward a slide, seeing as you're in charge at the moment?
I am in
charge.
charge.
We can do a brief little advert. Nice. Yeah, don't do anything too naughty. I mentioned earlier in passing, we have a news SEO plugin for WordPress, if you didn't know, that does a whole bunch of the technical and schema stuff that Barry talked about earlier. We talked about it does a whole bunch of structured data. It does a whole bunch of odds and ends. Nick is back. That's nice. It does XML news sitemaps, and they automatically do the 48 hours thing that Barry mentioned. A whole bunch of that architecture stuff is taken care of for you automatically, so you don't have to think about it, and you can focus on desperately trying to get into Google News, or taking advantage of already being there, or getting on Discover. There's a whole bunch of stuff for Discover in there as well. So
I am a fan of the news plugin, and nobody's paid me to say this, by the way.
Thank you.
News plugin. When I do technical analysis for news websites, and they run on WordPress, and they have the Yoast news plugin, makes my life so much easier because I know that most of the stuff I check for is sorted and I can focus on other bits of the audit. So yeah, I'm a big fan.
That's
Lovely,
great
thank
to
you. We've
hear.
recorded that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. So we're ready for Q&A. Well, already
my
a lot
screen
of
while I'm at it?
questions in chat.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Let's
You can
zoom us in.
stop sharing your screen if you
There we go.
want to. First of all, let me get our next webinar appear on screen for everybody that already wants to sign up, so we can get ahead with the first questions. And I wanted to start with some Google News questions first, because that was the last topic, so we're still on topic a little bit. And the first question is from Kirsten, and she's asking, how do I improve my chances to appear in Google local news?
Well, if you're a local news publishing website, you need to be identifiable as such, ideally associated with a fairly tight geographic area. Google tends to know where people are and tends to know where you as a publisher are focusing the content on by looking at your on-page optimization, your headlines, your navigation structure as well. And, you know, if you're a local news publisher, you tend to automatically build a sort of a relevancy for local news. The challenge is that I see some websites have if they target multiple locations with one website. Like I'm working with a German publisher at the moment who targets like 17 different towns and cities in Southwest Germany. That's interesting. That's more challenging, because then you sort of spread the diversity across the website, and you're sort of hoping Google can connect the dots. So you need to do a bit more signposting with your separate home pages for each local area, separate section titles for all of them. You know, not just one sports section, but have a separate sports section for every single one of your areas that you're targeting. So yeah, you need to be fairly explicit in your navigation structure, your page titles, your section titles, and of course produce a lot of locally relevant content. So yeah, it's not easy, that's for sure. It can be a bit of a challenge.
Cool. Thanks for that. I think Kirsten is helpful with that answer a lot. But to start with, we have, or not start with, but before that, we have a question of Evelyn. She asks, how do you even get your website to rank on Google Discover or Google News? I don't expect the full guide here, but maybe you can give some easy tips, quick wins, or where to start.
Be a news publisher. No, I say that so flippantly, but you need to take it seriously. If you want to rank in Google News, you need a separate website with very little commercial connections with other websites that publishes nothing but newsworthy content. And we're talking probably minimum 5 articles a day, more like 10 to 20 if you can manage.
Okay.
Written by actual journalists. You might need to poach people from different publications and consistently do that on a very solid technology stack, WordPress with Yoast News SEO Plugin, for example, for about 2 years. And then you have a fairly decent chance of starting to appear in Google News ecosystem. So it's not easy, but you have
start today.
Definitely be done, because I see websites doing it all the time. Google is letting more and more of them in, but it is websites that have been doing this for 2 or 3 years or more.
I guess the easier win is potentially Google Discover, where you could get away with slightly less scale, but then you still need a rockstar author writing in-depth, expert subject content that is useful, that's topical, that's aligned to what people want and need, which again, it's the same kind of infrastructure, so tricky.
With Discover, I've seen it happen in about 3 or 4 months if your website is good and has that sort of really, really good, useful content. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a pure news website either. It can be a blog or a news section in Discover. So
yeah, Yoast gets into Discover occasionally with like our release news. If we publish something big about WordPress, we get coverage for a few days afterwards. So yeah, it can be done. Yeah, it's good.
Cool. Then you already mentioned the author of those articles already. We have 2 questions on that. One is a little bit more general from Steve. He's asking how impactful the markup is, to deploy the markup for authors. But Brian is also asking if you have any examples of how Google or other search engines are using the data around authors, and does that improve their visibility?
I'll be entirely honest with you. I like authorship markup. I think news publishers and all websites to a degree should implement it. I do see news websites rank perfectly fine in Google's news ecosystem and in Discover without any article markup. let alone author markup. So it's an optional thing, but the websites that manage to rank without it are very, very popular, very big brand news websites that rely on a lot of other quality and relevancy signals. You're a smaller publisher, like you're not the New York Times, you're not the BBC, most of us. You want the author markup, and you want to make sure it's as complete as you can get it, so that Google understands who's writing the content, that they're real people, they have real journalistic specialties that they write about, and their content deserves to be shown in the news ecosystem.
Cool.
What was the other part of the question?
Yeah, so that's part of that. So if the author markup is important in general.
Yeah, I think it's something that happens behind the scenes. It's very hard to quantify that because we don't necessarily see the output of that very evidently in how Google ranks articles. It's just, Google does strive to rank quality content, and it relies very heavily on signals around the website it's published on, and increasingly also wants to rely on signals about the people who publish that content, which is where that authorship markup comes in.
And quite often the challenge there isn't the authorship, right? The authorship is automatic if you're using the right tech stack like WordPress and Yoast, but actually having an expert author who is demonstrably a rock star in that space and went to the right university and has the right education, etc. That's the hard bit. The markup describing that is pretty trivial. It's doing the hard work to have
the markups are sometimes not even necessary. I saw a case study not that long ago of a medical news website. Ironically, Google is very focused on the quality of content in the medical sphere. That massively improved their visibility and rankings by including quotes and from medical experts on the topic, as well as having their articles vetted by those medical experts with clear attribution at the end of it. And that was without any author markup. That's just showing that, this article has been vetted by that particular doctor who's a specialist in that field. So if you can show your expertise in that regard, that helps a lot as well.
Cool. Okay, thanks. So far on the news questions, we have a question with a lot of upvotes from Charlotte, and we touched based on social news as well a little bit, and she's asking SEO and social media, is Google now reading Instagram and other social media post captions?
I have no idea. What do you think, Jono?
Interesting. I don't know. They're definitely reading it, right? These, like an Instagram post is just a page on the web, and it's a page like any other page. It contains content. Instagram is a domain like any other domain, though with a whole bunch of...
Do they allow Googlebot crawling in robots.txt though?
That's an interesting question. So yeah, I guess we would need to check whether or not you can go do that in the background. But I think more broadly, a lot of these are just pages. They read it, they digest it. The links are quite often no followed. So they'll, like we discussed with Twitter earlier, they'll use it for discovery. They may pass some kind of quality signal, but it's unlikely. But they'll decide what they want to do for each site. Yeah. So maybe, but I guess that's not the point. These, generally speaking, content on social media platforms is going to be about discovery. It's going to be about getting your brand in front of people's faces and trying to create the kinds of behaviors that get you links and coverage and signals. If loads of people are retweeting and sharing and repinning and granning and posting your stuff, you're going to be in front of more journalists, you're going to be in front of more customers, and that spirals and you get more coverage and more rankings.
And Googlebot is allowed to call Instagram. I just noticed they have some disallow rules, but they're fairly narrow.
I've seen it before that I got a tweet as a result of searching for someone, so that's an option as well.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, thanks. The second most upvoted question is about more than one keyword on a page. So do we have any tips on identifying keyword gaps, and what is the best way to target more than one keyword on a page?
Oh, this is a long-standing question, isn't it? Yeah, like where is...
Yeah, I mean, if keywords are similar enough and about the same topic, you can have different sections in your articles, one for each subtopic, as it were, and it's pretty feasible that the article can rank for all of those subtopics. If they're too diverse and there's not a lot of topical overlap, you will want to split it out into separate web pages. A good way to do this is to just Google the keyword and see if it's like only dedicated pages that you're up to. Google both keywords that you want to rank for. If there's some pages that rank in both, then obviously Google will see, right, okay, you can have one piece of content targeting both keywords. If you see entirely different search results for both keywords, you probably need two separate pages for that particular search term, for those two search terms.
Yeah, and often there's a kind of circular thing where the market defines it, right? If everybody else has decided this is a topic and they're competing on it, then you've got to outdo them. And it almost doesn't matter whether or not they are to. It's like, what has everybody else done?
Yeah, that's always the key advice I have to anybody. Type it in Google and see
Google
how
it.
it serves up results for that search. Because that's the stuff you need to beat. That's the web pages you need to outrank, is the ones that Google is currently serving up for that. And you generally don't tend to do that by doing something drastically different. You need to do what the others are doing, but do it better.
Yeah, nice.
Cool. Thanks, guys. I think we have time for a few questions. There's another upvoted question from Bassam. It's about building links and if you should use keywords in your anchor text.
I'm not going to let Jono answer this one because he doesn't believe in link building, does he? It's a classic SEO question, isn't it? Anchor text versus branded links. I actually think anchor text links still work and still help your website rank better for that specific term that you have in the anchor text. But, and I'm probably on board with Jono here to a certain extent, if you worry about the ratio of anchor text links versus branded links, you're asking yourself the wrong questions. I'll give you an example. You type in SEO for Google News or Google News SEO in Google. I tend to be number 1, number 2 for that. I don't have any link building activity. I don't do anything like that. I just publish good content on optimizing for Google News, and I do that on a regular basis, and I promote it, and I'm building a brand around optimizing for Google News. It's the same with what Yoast are trying to do with the Yoast SEO Academy and all the other content that they have. You type in technical SEO training, they tend to rank good for that. And it's not because they have a certain amount of anchor text links to the web page. It's because they're very, very good content, very good training programs, very good resources, etc., etc. So I know, in an agency client or consultant client relationship, you get these questions asked sometimes, and you need to find ways to reframe that and be a more productive discussion. Or say, right, I see where you're coming from, but we should actually be talking about building a better website, building a better brand, building better content, and then those link questions become entirely irrelevant. I get this question from my news publishing clients. They know they need links to rank better in Google News, in all of Google's ecosystem, because links are a ranking factor. So they ask me, what's the best link building tactic? And I say, be very, very good in your news reporting. And then you don't have to worry about links at all.
Yeah.
That's the answer, really.
And when other people are linking to you because you're doing awesome stuff, you don't control how and where they do that, and you can't manipulate that. So yeah, great. Love it.
Well, thanks, guys. Although we have a lot of questions still left, it's time. So I'm really sorry for everybody that didn't get their question answered.
Yes, hang on there, Jono. We're going to do it for another hour.
Yeah, we'll just keep going.
Yeah, I'll just leave and you can.
But we should follow up, right? So we should probably take some of them. We'll follow up with some answers, and I guess you can tweet us and email us and stuff, and we'll definitely follow up.
Questions will be in this webinar. We can answer them afterwards. Okay. Well, first of all, to conclude, Barry, thanks for being here. Thanks for spreading your knowledge on news SEO. I think you have inspired a lot of people with everything you had to bring to this table. Next month, we have another special guest joining this webinar. It's Arij Abu Ali, and I'm a big fan of her. I follow her on Twitter. She's known from Women in Tech SEO, and she will join Jono for a brand new webinar. If you haven't signed up yet, use the green button on the bottom of the screen and be there, and we'll see you on July 19th, I believe. Thanks, Jono. Thanks, Barry.
Thank you.
Jono, see you
Thanks
next month.
Very much. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this.
And everybody, thanks for joining us.
We'll do this again.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.